Good morning, Warren, Greg, and Ajit. My name is Jackie Han. I'm from China and now work in Toronto, Canada. This is my 8th Berkshire Hathaway meetings at this point. I've probably spent more time with you than most people spend on Netflix. As you might guess, coming from a Chinese family, we've always had a soft spot for real estate. So the real question isn't why don't you own a house? It's why are you still buying stocks instead of more property? So here is my question. With today's high interest rates and global uncertainty, do you still believe in being greedy when others are fearful, or the value investing facing new challenges in today's environment? Thank you.
Yeah. Well, in respect to real estate, it's so much harder than stocks in terms of negotiation of deals, time spent, the involvement of multiple parties in the ownership. Usually when real estate gets in trouble, you find out you're dealing with more than the equity holder. But there have been times when large amounts of real estate have changed hands at bargain prices, but usually stocks were cheaper, but they were a lot easier to do. So Charlie did more real estate. Charlie enjoyed real estate transactions, and he actually did a fair number of them in the last 5 years of his life. But he was playing a game then, and it was an interesting game to him. But I think if you'd asked him to make a choice when he was 21, he had to either be in stocks exclusively the rest of his life or real estate the rest of his life, he would have chosen stocks in a second. There's just so much more opportunity, at least in the United States. There's so much more opportunity that presents itself in the security market than it does in real estate. And in real estate, you're usually dealing with a single owner or a family that owns maybe a large property they've had a long time. Maybe they've borrowed too much money against it. Maybe the population trends are against them. But to them, it's an enormous decision. When you walk down to the New York Stock Exchange, you can do billions of dollars worth of business totally anonymous, and you can do it in 5 minutes. And the trades are complete when they're complete. In real estate, when you make a big deal with a distressed lender, when you sign the deal, then you go into another phase. I mean, then people start negotiating more things, and it's a whole different game. And a different type of person, to some extent, enjoys the game. We did a few real estate deals that came our way in 2008 and 2009, but the amount of time that they would take us compared to doing something intelligent and probably better in securities, there was just no comparison. I mean, in a real estate deal, every sentence is as important as a person, and in stocks, if somebody needs to sell 20,000 shares of Berkshire or something, and they call us and the price is right, it's done in 5 seconds, and it closes all the time. People who you certainly wouldn't want to have marry your daughter, or they behave well, actually, in stocks. Partly that's because they're probably having their wires or phones or whatever it is recorded as to what they've said and everything. but the completion rate for working on anything in stocks is, assuming you've got a meeting of the minds on prices, essentially 100%. In real estate, it just begins when you agree on deals, and then they take forever. So for a guy 94, it's not the most interesting thing to get involved in something where the negotiations could take years. We have the capability. There have been some huge failures in fact, If you go all the way back to Zeckendorf in the 1960s, he was going to change the world, and Century City out in California is a product of his. And if you go to Urus, if you go to... he was sitting on top of the world with the Urus buildings. And so people tend to get in trouble in that business. The banks usually don't want to recognize it, but that takes a long time to go through the bank processes. They just got through redoing the Musk loan that he did when he was buying it 3 years ago, the company that's now X. And, 3 years to work out a transaction that where you've got parties on both sides that aren't ready to act. That we find it much better when people are just ready to pick up the phone, and you can do hundreds of millions of dollars worth of business in a day. I've been spoiled, but I like being spoiled, so we'll keep it that way.
Charlie, why are you investing in Redlands?
Well, I have a natural prejudice for this area because when I was at Caltech in 1943, I used to hang around here. My first wife went to Scripps College, and my sister went to Scripps College. And so I'm very familiar with this area. And of course, I've interfaced with a lot of the people who love these universities out here.
Yes.
And so I started with I always liked the orange trees against the mountains and the snow-capped whatever. So I started with a deep prejudice.
Yes.
But my investments here happened by accident. What happened was I live in a neighborhood which the Hasidic Jews sort of came into a few decades ago, a very successful group of people. And one day into my house, a very young 17-year-old Hasidic Jew came by and gave me the Hebrew Bible in Hebrew. And, Munger sounds like it could be a German Jewish name. And it means peddler in both German and English. So it wasn't totally crazy for an Hasidic Jew to think that Munger could read the Hebrew Bible in Hebrew, but of course I couldn't. And I got to talking with him, and one thing led to another, and I sort of befriended Avi and watched him grow up. And Avi never went to college. He has a mild attention deficit disorder, but a ferociously high IQ. And he was worried about it. And I said, Avi, don't worry about it. You don't need any college. You're going to succeed mightily. Well, Avi is now 32 and has 4 children and a hugely successful business. And I was right. He didn't need college.
And Avi's sitting right there. Stand up, Avi.
Yes, stand, wave. And Avi had a client, his main client in his apartment management business, and he was unhappy. And I think rightly so. And so I said to him one day, because I'd gotten to like and trust Avi, I said, why don't you just get rid of that client you got and buy a bunch of apartments for me? And the first ones we saw were the ones I bought out here. And that's how it happened.
And by the way, they're at the end of Alabama, those beautiful apartments. Yeah, they're really amazing. I think half of the occupants of those apartments work at AS3. So one day I'm sitting there and he calls me and he says, could I come out and talk to you? Of course, I didn't exactly know who Charlie was. So sure, yeah, okay. And that's what began this friendship, actually. It's amazing.
But we've had a fair amount of fun, Avi and his partner, Ruben and I. And it's kind of creative to buy old apartments and fix them up. And of course, we have a philosophy that there is no income unless the place is properly cared for. And the apartment management field is full of people who just milk the properties and do the very minimum. And that's a stupid mistake if you're a long-term investor. And Avi and I share a belief that all these things should be immediately improved. And I think in the first, year or something like that. We spent $600,000 on trees on just 4 projects.
He's got my heart right there.
Yeah. I was going to say, was that a planted question?
But Jack, you're probably doing it out of love, and I know how much better it's going to work for me, so I don't deserve much credit because it's very much in my interest financially to plant all those trees. Now, I would probably plant them anyway, but I can't prove that.
Yeah. Oh. Yeah. Oh.